Eliora knew she wasn't meant to survive the moment she saw Ronan through the flames. Calm, steady, holding the key that could save her life. 7 months pregnant and choking on smoke, she screamed his name as Makena leaned in and whispered something that made him step back, abandoning her. And as the fire closed in, Ronan mouthed the words that turned her heartbeat cold. By sunrise, she's gone. But what he didn't plan for was the person who pulled her out before the flames could. Eliora slammed her palms against the steel door, coughing so hard her chest burned. The air was thick, heavy, wrong. She could barely see through the smoke curling around her like fingers trying to pull her down. Her 7-month belly pressed against the door as she pounded harder, desperate, praying someone would hear. "Ronan!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Please, help me!" Through the haze, she saw movement outside the glass. 2 shadows. Her heart jumped. Finally, someone was there. She pressed her face closer, squinting through the smoke and tears. The figures became clearer. A man, a woman, standing still, too still. Her breath caught. It was Ronan, her husband, and beside him stood Makena, their maid, hand resting gently on his arm, like she belonged there. Eliora's knees almost gave out. Relief flooded her chest. They were going to open the door. They were going to save her, save their baby. But Ronan didn't move. He just stared at her through the glass, expression blank, unreadable. In his hand, something silver gleamed under the dim light outside. A key. The key to the door she was trapped behind. Eliora's heart stuttered. "Ronan," she whispered, barely able to form the words. "Please. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story." Makena leaned closer to Ronan, her lips moving softly near his ear. Eliora couldn't hear the words, but she saw his shoulders relax, saw him nod, slowly, saw him slip the key back into his pocket. "No, no, no, no. Ronan!" Eliora screamed again, pounding the door with everything she had left. "I'm pregnant! Please, don't do this!" But he didn't flinch, didn't look away. He just stood there, watching her like she was already gone. Then his lips moved. Eliora couldn't hear him through the thick door, but she read the words as clearly as if he'd shouted them. "By sunrise, she'll be gone, and we can start over." Makena smiled. The world tilted. Eliora stumbled backward, hand clutching her stomach as if she could protect the tiny life inside from the truth crashing into her. Her husband, the man who once kissed her forehead every morning, who promised to build a life with her, was standing outside while she burned. He wasn't there to save her. He was there to make sure she didn't survive. The smoke thickened. Her lungs screamed for air. Her vision blurred at the edges, darkness creeping in like a curtain slowly closing. She sank to her knees, tears cutting clean lines through the soot on her face. Her hand pressed against the door one last time, weak, trembling. "Why?" she whispered, though no one could hear. Ronan turned away first. Makena followed, her hand still on his arm, guiding him like she owned him. Eliora's body crumpled to the floor. The heat pressed down on her chest. Her baby kicked once, twice, as if fighting to stay alive. She curled around her belly, whispering through broken sobs. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Her eyes fluttered closed. The world faded into nothing but heat and darkness. But what Ronan and Makena didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined as they walked away into the night, was that this moment wouldn't be Eliora's ending. It would be her beginning. Before the fire, before the betrayal, before everything shattered, Eliora's life was simple. She didn't grow up surrounded by marble floors or crystal chandeliers. She came from a small coastal town where people knew each other's names and love didn't need money to feel real. She met Ronan at a community center fundraiser. He wasn't a billionaire then. He was just a tired man in a wrinkled shirt, sitting alone in the corner, staring at his laptop like it held the weight of the world. She walked over with a cup of coffee and said, "You look like you could use this more than I do." He looked up, surprised, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he smiled. They talked for hours that night, about dreams, about fear, about the kind of life they wanted to build. Ronan told her he was working day and night to grow his business, to prove he was more than the poor kid people expected to fail. Eliora told him she didn't care about empires, she cared about kindness. He kissed her hand before she left. "I'll remember you," he said. And he did. Their marriage wasn't grand. It was quiet, gentle, filled with small moments that felt bigger than anything money could buy. Breakfast on the balcony, long walks through the garden, late-night talks about the family they'd build someday. Ronan wasn't perfect, but he was present. He was hers. But as his empire grew, something inside him changed. The calls became longer, the trips more frequent, the smiles less real. Eliora tried to hold on to the man she married, but every time he came home, it felt like more of him stayed behind. She told herself, it was just stress, just temporary, just the price of success. Sometimes we ignore the truth because facing it feels harder than pretending. So she focused on the baby. She painted the nursery soft pink and lavender. She folded tiny onesies and placed them in drawers labeled Baby C. She whispered to her belly every night, promising her daughter that Daddy still loved them. He was just overwhelmed, just human, just trying. But Ronan's eyes began to change. They didn't light up when he looked at her anymore. They moved through her, past her, like she was furniture he'd stopped noticing. One evening, she asked him, "Do you still want this? Us?" He didn't answer right away. He stared at the fireplace, jaw tight, hands clenched. Finally, he said, "I want what's best for everyone." That wasn't a yes. Eliora felt something crack inside her chest, but she swallowed it down. She convinced herself she was being dramatic, hormonal, needy. But deep down, she knew. The man she married was slipping away, and she didn't know how to pull him back. What she didn't see, what she couldn't have known, was that someone else had already noticed the distance between them. McKenna, the maid who moved through their home like a shadow, quiet and careful, watching everything. McKenna saw the way Ronan rubbed his temples after phone calls, saw the way he stared at nothing for minutes at a time, saw the way his shoulders slumped under weight no one else seemed to notice, and she saw the opportunity. She made herself available in all the ways Eliora wasn't. A glass of water placed silently on his desk, a listening ear when he muttered frustrations under his breath, a soft nod when he complained about pressure. "Eliora doesn't understand what you're going through," she whispered one night. Ronan didn't respond, but he didn't disagree either. McKenna wasn't seductive. She was strategic. She didn't flirt. She planted seeds. She didn't rush. She waited. And in waiting, she found her opening. Ronan's empire was cracking behind closed doors. Debt, lawsuits, silent board pressure. He needed a way out. McKenna needed a way up. And Eliora, sweet, trusting, innocent Eliora, was standing in the way of both. She didn't know that by the time she noticed the change, McKenna had already noticed it too. And McKenna was ready to use it. McKenna wasn't always a maid. She didn't come from a world where cleaning other people's homes was supposed to be her destiny. She came from a place where survival meant watching, learning, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She learned early that people in power had predictable weaknesses: loneliness, ego, fear. And if you knew how to feed those weaknesses quietly, you could control them without them ever realizing it. Most people saw maids as background noise, invisible, forgettable. But McKenna wasn't born to be in the background. She was born to take over. When she first started working for the Caldwins, she studied them like a scientist studying an experiment. Eliora was easy to read, sweet, trusting. The kind of woman who believed everyone had good intentions. The kind who never saw betrayal coming until it was too late. But Ronan was different. McKenna watched him carefully. She noticed the way his hands trembled after business calls, the way he stared into the fireplace for minutes without blinking, the way he massaged his temples like he was trying to push invisible thoughts out of his head. He was scared, and fear, McKenna knew, was the easiest weakness to exploit. She didn't rush. She didn't flirt. She didn't make herself obvious. She just made herself available. A glass of water placed quietly on his desk when he looked stressed. A slow nod during tense conversations. A listening ear when he muttered frustrations no one else seemed to care about. "You carry so much," she said one night, while refilling his coffee. Ronan glanced up, surprised she was still there. "Someone has to," he muttered. McKenna nodded slowly. "Not everyone understands that kind of pressure." He didn't respond. But he didn't tell her to leave either. That was all the opening she needed. Over the weeks, she planted seeds. Small ones. Careful ones. She never said anything directly against Eliora. She didn't have to. She just let Ronan's frustration speak for itself. "Eliora doesn't understand the pressure you're under," she whispered one evening after he'd spent an hour on the phone with furious investors. Ronan looked at her, tired, drained. He didn't disagree. McKenna stayed quiet after that, letting the silence do the work. She knew how powerful silence could be. It gave people space to convince themselves of things they'd never admit out loud. And Ronan was convincing himself of something dangerous. That Eliora was a burden. That his marriage was a weight he couldn't carry anymore. That maybe, just maybe, his life would be easier without her. McKenna didn't put those thoughts there. She just gave them room to grow. Then she discovered something that changed everything. Late one night, while organizing files in Ronan's office, she found financial documents he'd hidden in a locked drawer. Lawsuits, debt, silent board pressure threatening to tear his empire apart. And buried at the bottom of the stack, a life insurance policy. On Eliora, for millions. McKenna's heart raced. Not from shock, from opportunity. She knew what this meant. Ronan was scared enough to plan for the worst. Scared enough to think about what would happen if Eliora wasn't around anymore. And if he was thinking about it, McKenna could make sure he acted on it. She didn't confront him. She didn't accuse him. She just mentioned it casually one evening while tidying up his office. "You know," she said softly, "most men don't take out policies like that unless they're afraid of losing everything." Ronan froze. "It's just business," he said stiffly. McKenna smiled gently. "Of course it is." But they both knew it wasn't. Ronan needed a way out, a way to save his empire, a way to escape the pressure crushing him from every side. McKenna needed a way up, a way to move from the shadows into the spotlight, a way to claim the life she'd been watching from the sidelines. And Eliora, sweet, innocent, trusting Eliora, was standing in the way of both. Eliora felt it before she understood it. The shift, the distance, the quiet ache that settled in her chest every time Ronan walked into a room and didn't look at her. He stopped calling during business trips, stopped placing his hand over her stomach to feel their baby kick, stopped whispering, "I love you," before bed. At first, she told herself it was temporary. He was busy, stressed, building something bigger than both of them. But weeks turned into months, and the man she married felt more like a stranger living in her house. One evening, she tried to talk to him. He was sitting in his office, staring at his laptop, jaw tight. "Ronan," she said softly, stepping inside. "Can we talk?" He didn't look up. "I'm busy." "You're always busy," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I miss you," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "Eliora, I don't have time for this right now." "For what?" "For us?" He finally looked at her, but his eyes were cold, empty. "Stop overthinking everything." She stepped back, stung. "I'm not overthinking. I'm just trying to understand why you won't talk to me anymore." "There's nothing to talk about," he said flatly, turning back to his screen. "I'm tired, that's all." But it wasn't all, and Eliora knew it. Have you ever felt something was wrong but convinced yourself you were just imagining it? That's what Eliora did. She told herself she was being emotional, hormonal, needy. She forced herself to believe that love didn't always look the same, that marriage had seasons, that this was just a hard one. But then, small, strange things started happening. McKenna appeared in places she shouldn't be, standing outside Ronan's office when Eliora walked by, sitting beside him during late-night phone calls, laughing softly at something he said, and Ronan defended her. Always. "She's just doing her job," he'd say when Eliora questioned why McKenna was in his office so late. She's helping me stay organized, he'd say when Eliora asked why McKenna knew his schedule better than she did. Eliora wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him, but her instincts whispered something darker. One night, Eliora woke up around midnight. Ronan wasn't beside her. She sat up, heart pounding, and listened. Faint voices drifted from downstairs. She slipped out of bed, moving slowly down the hallway, careful not to make noise. The voices grew clearer as she approached Ronan's office. His door was slightly open. Light spilled through the crack. Eliora's breath caught. Inside, Ronan sat at his desk, leaning back in his chair. And standing beside him, close, too close, was McKenna. Her hand rested on his shoulder. Eliora's stomach twisted. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she saw the way McKenna smiled, saw the way Ronan didn't pull away, saw the way they looked at each other like she didn't exist. Her hand moved to her belly, instinctively protecting the baby inside. She wanted to burst in, to demand answers, to scream, but fear paralyzed her. What if she was wrong? What if she was overreacting? What if confronting them only made things worse? So she stood there, frozen, watching the scene unfold like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Finally, McKenna stepped back, said something soft, and left through the side door. Ronan stayed at his desk, staring at nothing. Eliora backed away quietly, tears burning her eyes. She climbed back into bed, pulled the covers over her trembling body, and stared at the ceiling. She told herself it meant nothing, that McKenna was just being helpful, that Ronan was just stressed. But deep down, she knew something was terribly, horribly wrong. And the worst part? She didn't know how to fix it. She didn't know how to fight for a man who didn't seem to want her anymore. So she did what so many people do when the truth is too painful to face. She pretended everything was fine. She smiled when Ronan came home late. She cooked his favorite meals. She decorated the nursery and folded tiny clothes and whispered promises to her unborn daughter. She convinced herself that love would find its way back. But love wasn't the problem. Trust was. And trust, once broken, doesn't heal quietly. A storm was coming. Dark, violent, unstoppable. And Eliora was the only one who didn't know she was standing directly in its path. Ronan Caldwin had everything the world admired: wealth, power, influence. His name opened doors. His face graced magazine covers. People called him a visionary, a genius, a man who turned dreams into empires. But behind closed doors, his empire was crumbling. The lawsuits came first. Investors he'd promised returns. Partners he'd borrowed from. People who wanted their money back, and they wanted it now. Then came the board meetings, where men in suits spoke in low, threatening voices about failure, about consequences, about what happens when towers built too fast start to fall. Ronan barely slept. His hands shook during phone calls. His chest tightened every time his assistant handed him another legal document. And every time he looked at Eliora, he felt something worse than fear. Guilt. She was kind. Too kind. The type of woman who believed the best in people, who thought love could fix anything, who trusted him completely. And that trust felt like chains around his neck. Because Ronan knew the truth. He wasn't the man she thought he was. He wasn't the man who promised her forever. He was a man drowning in debt, suffocating under pressure, making decisions he never thought he'd make. And Eliora's innocence made him feel every bit of it. One evening, after another brutal call with his lawyers, Ronan sat alone in his study, head in his hands. The door opened softly. He didn't need to look up to know who it was. McKenna. She moved quietly, placing a glass of whiskey on his desk without a word. "You look exhausted," she said gently. Ronan exhaled slowly. "I am. You've sacrificed everything for this empire?" McKenna continued, sitting across from him. "Most people don't understand that. They see the success, but they don't see the cost." Ronan looked at her. For the first time in weeks, someone wasn't asking him for something. Someone was just listening. "Eliora doesn't get it," he muttered, more to himself than to a day. Her. McKenna nodded slowly. She's a good person. But good people don't always understand what it takes to survive in your world. Ronan swirled the whiskey in his glass, staring into it like it held answers. She loves you, McKenna added softly. But love doesn't always understand pressure. He didn't respond. But he didn't argue either. McKenna leaned forward slightly, her voice careful, measured. You need someone beside you who understands what you're going through. Someone who sees the weight you carry and doesn't ask you to carry more. Ronan's jaw tightened. Someone, she said, pausing for effect, who can help you protect what you've built. That word, protect, it burrowed into Ronan's mind like a seed in fertile soil. McKenna didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. She stood, smoothed her dress, and left the room as quietly as she'd entered. But the damage was done. Ronan sat alone, staring at the empty doorway, her words echoing in his head. Eliora was kind, but kindness didn't save empires. Eliora was loyal, but loyalty didn't stop lawsuits. Eliora loved him, but love didn't pay debts. And slowly, terribly, a thought began to form in the darkest corner of his mind. What if Eliora was the problem? Not because she did anything wrong, but because her presence reminded him of the man he used to be, the man who believed in love and promises and building something real. That man was a liability now, and liabilities had to be eliminated. Ronan didn't want to think it. He pushed it away, disgusted with himself. But the thought kept creeping back, stronger each time. What if his life would be easier without her? What if he could start over? Without the guilt, without the reminders, without the weight of a marriage he couldn't carry anymore. McKenna had planted the seed, and Ronan, desperate and drowning, let it grow. He didn't realize McKenna wasn't offering him a solution. She was offering him a trap, because the promise of freedom came with a dark caveat. It required eliminating whatever Ronan believed was holding him back. And in his twisted, fear-clouded mind, that thing became Eliora. McKenna found the documents late one night while organizing Ronan's office. She wasn't snooping. She didn't need to. Ronan had become careless, leaving files scattered across his desk, too exhausted to hide his secrets anymore. But one folder caught her eye. It was labeled Personal Estate Planning. She opened it slowly, heart racing, eyes scanning the pages, and there it was, a life insurance policy, on Eliora, for millions. McKenna's breath caught, not from shock, from opportunity. She flipped through the rest of the documents. Financial statements, trust fund details, legal clauses written in cold, clinical language. Eliora had inherited a trust fund from her late grandmother, a substantial one. But the terms were ironclad. Ronan had no access to it. Not while Eliora was alive. Unless something happened to her. Then everything transferred to him. The trust, the insurance payout, everything. McKenna closed the folder carefully, her mind already spinning. This wasn't just a policy. This was a plan. Whether Ronan fully realized it or not, he'd already taken the first step towards something dark. She waited a week before mentioning it. Timing was everything. One evening, after another brutal day of phone calls and legal threats, Ronan sat slumped in his chair, staring at nothing. McKenna entered quietly, setting a cup of tea on his desk. You know, she said softly, sitting across from him. Most men don't take out policies like that unless they're afraid of losing everything. Ronan's head snapped up. What are you talking about? McKenna gestured toward the estate folder, still sitting on his desk. The life insurance. On Eliora. I wasn't trying to pry, but I saw it while organizing. Ronan's jaw tightened. It's just business. Just a safety measure. Of course, McKenna said calmly. But it's interesting, isn't it? How much security something like that provides. Ronan frowned. What are you getting at? McKenna leaned forward slightly, her voice careful, measured. I'm just saying, if anything ever happened to her, your empire would be safe. The debt, the lawsuits, all of it. You'd have the resources to fight back. Ronan stared at her, his expression unreadable. I'm not suggesting anything, McKenna added quickly. raising her hands. I'm just pointing out facts. You've worked too hard to lose everything now. Ronan said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. McKenna stood, smoothing her dress. You're a good man, Ronan. You've sacrificed so much. I just hope you're not carrying weight you don't have to. She left the room, leaving the folder open on his desk. Ronan stared at it for a long time. He didn't want Eliora dead. He told himself that over and over. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't capable of something like that. But the idea of freedom began to form. Slowly, quietly, like a shadow creeping across a wall. Freedom from the guilt. Freedom from the pressure. Freedom from the responsibilities of a marriage he could no longer carry. How many times do we blame others for choices we made ourselves? Ronan closed his eyes, rubbing his temples. He thought about Eliora, about the way she smiled at him when they first met, about the promises he made, about the life they built together. But then he thought about the lawsuits, the investors, the board members who wanted his head, the empire crumbling beneath his feet. And he thought about what McKenna said. If anything happened to her, your empire would be safe. He opened his eyes, staring at the folder again. McKenna didn't force the thought. She didn't push him toward anything. She just handed him the matches. And Ronan, desperate and drowning, began to wonder what would happen if he lit them. He didn't make a decision that night. He told himself he was just thinking, just considering options, just trying to survive. But deep down, in the darkest corner of his mind, a terrible plan was taking shape. And once that plan took root, it became harder and harder to pull it out. When Eliora saw the candlelit table set for two, her heart skipped. For the first time in months, she felt something she thought she'd lost: hope. The dining room glowed soft and warm. Rose petals scattered across the white tablecloth. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier. Everything looked perfect, romantic, like the way things used to be. Ronan wanted to fix this. He wanted them back. Eliora rushed upstairs, hands trembling with excitement. She pulled out the soft peach dress Ronan once said made her look like a sunrise. She curled her hair, applied light makeup, stood in front of the mirror, hand resting on her belly, smiling. "Daddy's trying," she whispered to her baby. "He's really trying." When she came downstairs, Ronan was already seated, dressed in a crisp white shirt, staring at his empty plate. He looked up when she entered, and for a brief second, something flickered in his eyes. Regret? Sadness? She couldn't tell. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. Eliora smiled, sitting across from him. "Thank you. This is really nice, Ronan." He nodded, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. McKenna appeared from the kitchen, carrying plates of food. She set them down gently, her movements smooth, practiced. She smiled at Eliora, warm and polite. "Enjoy your meal," McKenna said softly before disappearing back into the kitchen. Eliora barely noticed her. She was too focused on Ronan, searching his face for signs of the man she fell in love with. They ate in silence for a while. Eliora tried to make conversation, talking about the nursery, about baby names, about plans for the future. Ronan nodded along, but his responses were short, distracted, and he kept glancing at something in his pocket. Eliora noticed, but didn't say anything. She told herself he was just stressed, that he was trying, that this dinner was proof he still cared. But deep down, something felt off. The way his jaw stayed tight, the way his eyes wouldn't quite meet hers, the way his hand trembled slightly when he lifted his glass. "Ronan," she said gently, reaching across the table. "Are you okay?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a moment, she saw something that terrified her. Grief, like he was already mourning her. "I'm fine," he said quickly, pulling his hand back. "Just tired." Eliora forced a smile. "We'll get through this. Whatever's going on, we'll figure it out together." Ronan didn't respond. He just stared at his plate. After dessert, he stood abruptly. "I need to grab something from the estate office. I'll be right back." Eliora's heart sank. "Now? Can't it wait?" "It's important," he said, not looking at her. "I won't be long." He walked over, leaned down, and kissed her forehead. Not lovingly, not tenderly. Just mechanically, like he was checking off a box. Eliora closed her eyes, trying to hold onto the warmth of his lips. She didn't know that kiss was meant to be goodbye. Ronan walked out of the dining room without looking back. The front door opened and closed. The sound of his car engine faded into the distance. Eliora sat alone at the candlelit table, staring at the roses, trying to convince herself everything was okay. But then the lights flickered. Just once, barely noticeable. Eliora frowned, looking up at the chandelier. The candles on the table fluttered, flames dancing in a way that didn't match the stillness of the room. She glanced toward the kitchen. Everything seemed normal, but the air felt different, heavier, warmer. The lights flickered again, and this time, they didn't come back on as bright. Eliora stood slowly, heart beginning to race. Something wasn't right. She moved toward the hallway, and that's when she smelled it. Smoke. Faint at first, then stronger. Her breath caught. She turned toward the source, eyes widening. Near the far wall, where McKenna had carefully placed candles earlier that evening, a small flame licked the edge of the curtain. Eliora's heart stopped. "No," she whispered. The flame grew. Fast. Too fast. She ran toward it, trying to smother it with her hands, but the fire spread like it had been waiting for permission. The heat surged. The smoke thickened. And in that moment, Eliora realized something horrifying. The candles weren't an accident. They'd been moved, positioned, placed exactly where they needed to be. Seconds after Ronan left, the lights flickered, the heat shifted, and the foundation of her entire life began to crack. The flames moved faster than Eliora could process. 1 second, a small flicker. The next, a wall of fire spreading across the curtains, climbing the walls, eating everything in its path. She stumbled backward, coughing, eyes burning. The smoke thickened, turning the air into something solid, something suffocating. "Help!" she screamed, voice raw. "Somebody help me!" She ran toward the nearest exit, the side door leading to the garden. Her hands grabbed the handle, twisted hard, locked. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She tried again, yanking, pulling, desperate. Still locked. She spun around, eyes searching through the smoke. The main entrance. She could get out through the main entrance. She ran, belly heavy, movements clumsy. Her lungs screamed for air. Every breath felt like swallowing fire. She reached the front door, grabbed the handle. Locked. "No, no, no," she whispered, pounding her fists against the steel. "Please, open." She tried the windows. Sealed. Every single one. Panic exploded in her chest. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't just a fire. Someone had locked her inside. Through the smoke, she saw movement outside the glass entryway. Shadows. 2 figures standing in the dim light beyond the flames. Relief crashed over her. Someone was there. Someone would help. She stumbled toward the glass, pressing her palms against it, coughing violently. "Please," she begged. "Help me. I'm pregnant." The figures stepped closer. The smoke cleared just enough for her to see their faces. Her breath stopped. Ronan and McKenna. Eliora's heart shattered. "Ronan!" she screamed, slamming her hands against the glass. "Open the door, please!" But he didn't move. He just stood there, staring at her through the glass like she was already gone. In his hand, something silver gleamed under the faint light. The key to the door she was trapped behind. Eliora's knees weakened. "Ronan, please," she whispered, tears streaming down her soot-covered face. "Our baby. Think about our baby." McKenna leaned closer to him, her hand resting gently on his arm. She whispered something soft, something Eliora couldn't hear, and Ronan nodded. He slipped the key back into his pocket. Eliora's world collapsed. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no." She pounded the glass harder, screaming, begging, praying. But Ronan's expression didn't change. Cold, empty, final. His lips moved. Eliora couldn't hear the words through the thick glass, but she read them clearly. "By sunrise, she'll be gone, and we can start over." McKenna smiled. Imagine trusting someone completely, only to discover they were the one who planned your end. Eleora stumbled backward, hand clutching her stomach, as if she could protect the tiny life inside from the truth crashing into her. Her husband, the man who promised to love her forever, the man who kissed her forehead just minutes ago. He wasn't there to save her. He was there to watch her die. The smoke thickened. The heat pressed down on her chest like a weight she couldn't lift. Her vision blurred at the edges, darkness creeping in slowly. She sank to her knees, tears cutting clean lines through the soot on her face. Her hand pressed against the door one last time, weak, trembling, desperate. "Why?" she whispered, though no one could hear her. Through the haze, she saw Ronan turn away first, calm, steady, like he'd already made peace with what he'd done. Makena followed, her hand still on his arm, guiding him like she owned him, like she'd won. Eleora's body crumpled to the floor, the heat pressed against her skin, the smoke filled her lungs. Her baby kicked once, twice, as if fighting to stay alive. She curled around her belly, whispering through broken sobs. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm so sorry." Her eyes fluttered closed. The world faded into nothing but heat and darkness, and the unbearable weight of betrayal. She thought she was dying. She thought this was the end. But what Ronan and Makena didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined as they walked away into the night, was that this moment wouldn't be Eleora's ending. It would be her beginning. Because sometimes, the people you trust to protect you are the ones who destroy you. And sometimes, the ones left for dead are the ones who rise stronger. When Eleora collapsed to her knees, she didn't collapse from the smoke. She collapsed from the truth. The man she loved chose to end her life. But destiny had other plans. Eleora woke to the smell of herbs and wood smoke. Her eyes cracked open slowly, blinking against the dim light filtering through small windows. Everything hurt. Her chest, her throat, her heart. Where was she? She tried to sit up, but her body screamed in protest. A hand pressed gently against her shoulder, guiding her back down. "Don't move yet," a calm voice said. "You need rest." Eleora turned her head. A woman sat beside her, mid-50s, sharp eyes, steady hands. She wore simple clothes and had the kind of face that looked like it had seen too much, but refused to break. "Who are you?" Eleora whispered, voice raw. "My name is Ansa," the woman replied. "And you're safe. For now." Eleora's hand flew to her belly, panic surging. "My baby!" "Is my baby still alive?" Ansa said firmly. "Barely, but alive. You were breathing when I found you. Not by much, but enough." Eleora's breath shuddered out. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "How did you? Where am I?" "My cottage," Ansa said. "Deep in the woods behind your estate. I saw the fire, saw the smoke. I went to help, but when I got close, I saw something that stopped me." Eleora frowned. "What?" Ansa's expression darkened. "Your husband, and that maid, standing outside the burning house. Not calling for help, not breaking down doors, just standing there, watching." Eleora's heart clenched. The memory crashed back. Ronan's face, Makena's smile, the key in his pocket. "No," she whispered. "He wouldn't." "He did," Ansa interrupted, voice hard. "I watched them, Eleora. They weren't trying to save you. They were waiting for you to die." The words hit like a sledgehammer. Eleora's chest tightened, breath coming in short, painful gasps. "But why?" she choked out. "Why would he do that? I'm his wife. I'm carrying his child." Ansa leaned forward, eyes filled with sad certainty. "Because people don't always love us the way we love them. And sometimes, the ones we trust the most are the ones who hurt us the worst." Eleora shook her head, tears streaming. "I don't understand. I gave him everything. I loved him. I believed in him." "I know," Ansa said gently, "but love doesn't protect you from betrayal. Sometimes it blinds you to it." Eleora covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Everything she thought she knew was a lie. Her marriage, her husband, her entire life. Ansa let her cry. When the sobs finally quieted, she spoke again, voice firm. "You survived tonight for a reason, Eleora. Don't waste that reason by going back. Eleora looked up, eyes swollen, voice broken. Where would I even go? He thinks I'm dead. The world thinks I'm dead. Exactly, Ansa said. And that gives you something most people never get. What? A second chance. A clean slate. A chance to become someone new. Someone they'll never see coming. Eleora stared at her, heart pounding. You're not just a victim anymore, Ansa continued. You're a survivor. And survivors have power that the people who tried to destroy them can't even imagine. Eleora's hands trembled. She thought about Ronan, about McKenna, about the way they stood outside, calm and cold, while she begged for her life. Something shifted inside her, something dark and quiet and unstoppable. She wasn't the same woman who pounded on that door, begging for mercy. That woman died in the fire. The woman lying in this bed was someone new, someone harder, someone angrier, someone dangerous. Ansa saw the change in her eyes and nodded slowly. Good. Hold on to that feeling. You're going to need it. Eleora's jaw tightened. What do I do now? First, you heal, Ansa said. Then, you decide what kind of person you want to be. The one who runs and hides, or the one who makes them regret ever underestimating you. Eleora's hand rested on her belly, feeling the tiny life still fighting inside her. She thought about the future, about her daughter, about the kind of world she wanted to bring her into. A world where monsters like Ronan and McKenna didn't win. She looked at Ansa, eyes clear, voice steady. I'm not running. Ansa smiled, a small, knowing smile. I didn't think you would. Eleora wasn't just a survivor. She had become someone dangerous. The pain hit Eleora in the middle of the night, sharp and sudden, like something inside her was tearing apart. She gasped, clutching her stomach, eyes snapping open in the darkness. Ansa, she whispered, voice shaking. Something's wrong. Ansa was beside her in seconds, hand pressed against Eleora's forehead. How bad? Bad, Eleora breathed, face twisted in agony. It hurts. It hurts so much. Ansa's jaw tightened. She'd seen this before. The baby was coming. Too early. Too soon. Outside, rain hammered against the cottage roof, thunder rolling across the sky like a warning. We need to move you, Ansa said, voice calm but urgent. Now. She helped Eleora to the small bed near the fireplace, laying blankets beneath her, lighting candles around the room. The storm raged outside, but inside, time slowed to agonizing seconds. Eleora screamed. The pain was unbearable, waves crashing over her, pulling her under. She gripped Ansa's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. I can't do this, she sobbed. I can't. Yes, you can, Ansa said firmly, eyes locked on hers. You've survived worse. You'll survive this too. Hours passed. Long, brutal, endless hours. Eleora's body shook with exhaustion. Her voice went raw from screaming. She begged for it to stop, begged for mercy, begged for anything. And then, finally, a sound. A soft, fragile cry. Eleora's breath caught. Tears spilled down her cheeks. But this time, they weren't from pain. She's here, Ansa whispered, wrapping the tiny baby in a clean blanket. You did it, Eleora. She's here. Ansa placed the baby in Eleora's trembling arms. She was impossibly small, fragile, beautiful. Eleora stared down at her daughter, heart breaking and healing at the same time. Hi, baby, she whispered, voice thick with tears. I'm your mama. The baby's eyes fluttered open for just a second, tiny fingers curling against Eleora's chest. For one perfect moment, everything felt right. But then the baby's breathing changed. It became shallow, too shallow. Eleora's heart stopped. Ansa? What's wrong? Ansa leaned closer, listening, checking. Her face went pale. She needs help. Medical help. Now. No, Eleora whispered, clutching her daughter tighter. No, she's fine. She's breathing. She's okay. She won't be, if we wait, Ansa said, voice hard. I have to take her to the hospital. I'll come with you, Eleora said, trying to sit up. But her body gave out, collapsing back onto the bed. Ansa shook her head. You're too weak. You'll die if you move right now. I don't care, Eleora choked out. She's my baby. I can't lose her. You won't, Ansa promised, gently taking the baby from her arms. But I have to go now. Eleora reached out, hands trembling, tears streaming. Please, don't take her from me. Ansa's eyes softened. I'm saving her, Eleora. That's what you want, isn't it? Eleora nodded, sobbing, heart shattering into pieces. Ansa wrapped the baby tightly, shielding her from the rain. I'll bring her back, I promise. But they both knew that was a lie. Some sacrifices cut deeper than words can hold. Ansa disappeared into the storm, the baby's soft cries fading into the distance. Eleora lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, arms empty, heartbroken. She'd survived the fire, survived the betrayal, survived the birth. But this, watching her daughter disappear into the rain, knowing she might never hold her again, this was a different kind of death. Hours later, Ansa returned. Alone, Eleora's breath stopped. Where is she? She's alive, Ansa said quickly. Stable. But the hospital couldn't identify a parent. They placed her in emergency foster care. Eleora's world collapsed. Foster? Care? No, I have to get her. I have to. You can't, Ansa interrupted. Not yet. You're too weak. And if you show up now, they'll ask questions. Questions that will lead them back to Ronan. Questions that could put her in danger. Eleora covered her face, sobbing uncontrollably. She's safe, Ansa said gently. She's alive. That's what matters. But it didn't feel like it mattered. It felt like losing everything, all over again. Eleora whispered through her tears. Will I ever see her again? Ansa hesitated. I don't know. Eleora closed her eyes, heart shattered, arms aching for the tiny life she'd only held for minutes. Her daughter lived, but Eleora wasn't strong enough to hold her again. For now, Eleora saw her own funeral on the news 3 weeks later. She sat in Ansa's cottage, wrapped in a thin blanket, staring at the television screen like she was watching someone else's life. Tragic loss. Billionaire's wife dies in a state fire. The headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Photos of her smiling face flashed by. Photos from happier times. Photos of a woman who no longer existed. Then the camera cut to Ronan. He stood at a podium, dressed in black, eyes red and swollen. The perfect grieving widower. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward, hungry for his pain. Eleora was everything to me, he said, voice breaking. She was kind, loving, and the best thing that ever happened to me. Losing her and our unborn child has destroyed me. Eleora's breath caught. Our unborn child. He didn't even know the baby survived. And he never would. Beside Ronan, Makena stood quietly, dressed in respectful gray, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Supportive. Comforting. The loyal maid, standing by her employer in his darkest hour. Eleora's stomach turned. The world believed them. Every word, every tear, every lie. She deserved better, Ronan continued, wiping his eyes. And I'll spend the rest of my life honoring her memory. The screen went black as Ansa shut off the television. Silence filled the room. Eleora stared at the dark screen, hands trembling. They think I'm dead. Good, Ansa said flatly. Let them. Eleora looked at her, eyes hollow. I don't understand. How can this be good? Ansa sat down beside her, voice calm but firm. Because dead people can't be hurt. Dead people can't be manipulated. Dead people can't be controlled. Eleora shook her head. But I'm not dead. Exactly, Ansa said. And that's your advantage. They think you're gone. They think they won. But you're still here. And that makes you the most dangerous thing they'll never see coming. Eleora stared at her hands. They looked different now. Scarred. Rougher. The fire had changed her face too. Not drastically, but enough. The softness was gone. Her cheekbones looked sharper. Her eyes looked harder. She barely recognized herself anymore. You need a new name, Ansa said, breaking the silence. A new identity. You can't be Eleora Caldwin anymore. Eleora's Throat tightened. I don't know how to be anyone else. You'll learn, Ansa said. Because the woman you were? She trusted too easily. She loved too deeply. She didn't see betrayal coming. Eliora flinched. But the woman you're becoming? Ansa continued. She won't make those mistakes again. Eliora closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Who am I supposed to be? Ansa thought for a moment. Someone strong. Someone untraceable. Someone who can walk back into their world without them ever knowing it's you. They sat together in silence, thinking, planning. Finally, Ansa spoke. Lyra. Eliora looked up. What? Lyra, Ansa repeated. Short, strong, easy to remember but hard to trace. Eliora tested the name on her tongue. Lyra. It felt foreign, unfamiliar, but also freeing. And a last name? Ansa asked. Eliora thought about her old life, about the woman who believed in love and happy endings, about the woman who died in that fire. Mirel, she said softly. Ansa nodded. Lyra Mirel. Eliora repeated it, voice steadier. Lyra Mirel. It didn't feel like her, but that was the point. Eliora Caldwin was dead, buried under lies and betrayal, and a funeral she watched from miles away. But Lyra Mirel? She was just beginning. Ansa placed a hand on her shoulder. You're not going back for revenge, are you? Lyra looked at her, eyes cold, voice steady. No. Good, Ansa said. Revenge is messy, emotional. It makes you sloppy. Lyra's jaw tightened. I'm not going back for revenge. Ansa raised an eyebrow. Then what are you going back for? Lyra stared at the blank television screen, seeing Ronan's face, seeing McKenna's hand on his arm, seeing the world that believed their lies. Her voice came out quiet but sharp as a blade. The truth. Ansa smiled, slow and knowing. That's even more dangerous. Lyra stood, legs shaky but determined. She walked to the mirror hanging on the wall, staring at the stranger looking back at her. Her face was different. Her body was different. Her heart was different. Eliora Caldwin was gone. Lyra Mirel had arrived, and she wasn't coming back for love. She was coming back for the truth. The training began at dawn. Every single day. No exceptions. Lyra woke to Ansa's voice, sharp and unwavering. Up! Now! Her body screamed in protest. Her muscles ached. Her lungs burned. But she pushed herself out of bed anyway, because weakness wasn't an option anymore. Ansa didn't coddle her, didn't comfort her, didn't tell her it would be okay. Instead, she pushed her harder. Move without sound, Ansa instructed, watching Lyra cross the cottage floor. You're too loud. Again. Lyra tried again, and again, and again. For weeks, they practiced silence. How to walk without being heard. How to open doors without creaking. How to exist in a room without being noticed. Invisibility isn't about hiding, Ansa said. It's about blending. People see what they expect to see. Give them nothing unusual, and they'll look right past you. Lyra absorbed every word. Then came the lessons on reading people. Watch their hands, Ansa said. Hands tell the truth when mouths lie. Watch their eyes. Eyes reveal fear, doubt, guilt. Lyra practiced on strangers during their rare trips into town. She'd sit quietly in cafes, observing. A man tapping his fingers nervously. A woman avoiding eye contact. A couple smiling at each other but sitting too far apart. Everyone has a tell, Ansa said. Your job is to find it before they find yours. Months passed, then years. Lyra's body grew stronger, leaner, faster. Her mind sharpened. She learned to control her emotions, to mask her pain, to smile when she wanted to scream. But every single day, she thought about her daughter. Where was she? Was she safe? Was she happy? Did she ever wonder about her real mother? Lyra would sit by the window late at night, staring at the stars, whispering promises into the darkness. I'm coming back for you. I promise. I just need to be strong enough first. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is wait. Ansa noticed the pain in her eyes, but never pushed her to talk about it. Instead, She gave Lyra something to focus on. Control. Emotion is a weapon, Ansa said one evening. But only if you control it. Let it control you, and you've already lost. Lyra practiced masking her feelings. She'd think about Ronan's betrayal, about the fire, about losing her daughter, and force her face to stay calm, neutral, unreadable. Good, Ansa said, watching her. Now do it when someone's yelling at you. Do it when someone's threatening you. Do it when your world is falling apart. Lyra did, over and over, until her emotions became tools instead of weaknesses. 3 years passed. Lyra was no longer the woman who begged at a locked door. She wasn't the woman who trusted too easily or loved too deeply. She was calculated, strategic, patient. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Ansa turned to her. "Are you ready?" Lyra looked up. "For what?" "To go back." Lyra's breath caught. She'd been preparing for this moment for years. But now that it was here, fear crept in. "What if I'm not strong enough?" she whispered. Ansa's eyes hardened. "Then you wait longer. But if you go back now, you go back certain. You don't fight until you know you can win. You don't return until you're stronger than the people who tried to end you." Lyra stared into the fire, flames reflecting in her eyes. She thought about Ronan, about Makena, about the empire they built on lies. She thought about her daughter, growing up without knowing her. And she thought about the woman she used to be, the woman who died in that fire. That woman was gone forever. But the woman sitting here now, she was something else entirely. Lyra looked at Ansa, voice steady, eyes cold. "I'm ready." Ansa nodded slowly. "Then there's one more thing you need to know." Lyra frowned. "What?" Ansa pulled out a folder, placing it on the table between them. Inside were documents, photos, financial records. "I've been tracking them," Ansa said. "Ronan, Makena, their foundation, their public image, everything." Lyra's heart raced as she flipped through the pages. Ronan had become even more powerful. His foundation was celebrated worldwide. He was seen as a hero, a grieving widower who turned tragedy into purpose. And Makena? She was by his side in every photo, smiling, confident, untouchable. Lyra's jaw tightened. "They think they won," Ansa said quietly, "and that's their weakness." Lyra closed the folder, eyes blazing with quiet determination. "I will be stronger," she whispered, "and when I go back, they won't see me coming." While Lyra trained in silence, Ronan Caldwin became a hero. His face appeared on magazine covers. His name trended on social media. News outlets called him the billionaire widower who turned tragedy into purpose. He launched the Caldwin Family Safety Foundation with a mission to prevent fire-related deaths and support families in crisis. He donated millions. He gave speeches at universities, conferences, galas. He shook hands with politicians and celebrities. The world loved him, and he loved the world loving him. Lyra watched it all from Ansa's cottage. Sitting in front of the small television, fists clenched, jaw tight. "Look at him," she whispered, staring at Ronan's polished smile on the screen. "He's using my death to build his empire." Ansa stood behind her, arms crossed. "That's what people like him do. They turn pain into profit." On the screen, Ronan stood at a podium, eyes glistening with fake tears. "Eliora's death changed me. It taught me that life is fragile, that we must protect the ones we love. That's why this foundation exists, to honor her memory, to save lives." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. People stood, moved by his words. Lyra's stomach turned. Beside Ronan, Makena stood quietly, dressed in elegant navy, her expression respectful and composed. The perfect assistant, the loyal partner, the woman who stood by him through his darkest hour. But Lyra saw the truth in her eyes. Makena wasn't mourning. She was calculating. Over the next few months, Lyra tracked every move Ronan and Makena made. She read articles, watched interviews, studied their public appearances, and she noticed something. Makena was no longer just a maid. She was Ronan's chief operations partner. She managed his schedule, She advised him on business decisions. She appeared in photos at his side more often than not. Whispers started spreading. Is there something going on between them? How long after his wife's death did this start? Isn't it a little soon? Ronan denied everything publicly. He released statements calling McKenna a trusted colleague and friend, and insisting their relationship was purely professional. But behind closed doors, McKenna controlled everything. She decided which meetings Ronan attended, which investors he met with, which charities received donations. She whispered advice into his ear during board meetings. She vetted his speeches. She managed his image. Ronan had become the face of the empire, but McKenna was the brain. Ansa watched the interviews with Lyra one evening, shaking her head. She's not just ambitious, she's dangerous. Lyra looked at her. What do you mean? Ronan is guilty, Ansa said. But he's weak. He made decisions out of fear. He let himself be manipulated. And McKenna? Ansa's eyes darkened. McKenna planned everything. She saw an opportunity and took it. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't hesitate. She's the real architect of what happened to you. Lyra felt something cold settle in her chest. She'd spent years thinking about Ronan, about his betrayal, about the way he stood outside that door, holding the key, choosing to let her die. But McKenna was the one who orchestrated it all. McKenna was the one who planted the seeds, who moved the candles, who whispered poison into Ronan's fear, until he believed the only way out was through Eliora's death. Ronan was guilty, but McKenna was the mastermind. Lyra's hands trembled. She used him. Yes, Ansa said, and now she's reaping the rewards. On the screen, McKenna smiled softly at something Ronan said, her hand brushing his arm in a gesture that looked innocent but felt deliberate. Lyra's jaw tightened. She'd been so focused on Ronan that she'd underestimated the woman standing beside him, the woman who had nothing to lose and everything to gain, the woman who turned a billionaire's fear into her own personal empire. Lyra stood slowly, eyes locked on the screen. I need to know everything about her, she said quietly. Where she came from, what she wants, how she thinks. Ansa nodded. I'll dig deeper. Lyra stared at McKenna's smiling face, memorizing every detail. Her enemy wasn't only Ronan. It was the woman who whispered poison into his fear. Lyra finally worked up the courage to ask the question that haunted her every night. My daughter, do you know where she is? Ansa hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes. Lyra's breath stopped. Is she alive? She's alive, Ansa said gently. And she's safe. Tears spilled down Lyra's cheeks before she could stop them. Where? Ansa pulled out a folded piece of paper from her pocket, handing it to Lyra. She was adopted by a family about 40 miles from here. Good people, kind people. They named her Seren. Seren, Lyra whispered, testing the name on her tongue. What does it mean? Star, Ansa said softly. Lyra's heart clenched. Her daughter was a star. Bright, beautiful, alive. Can I see her? Lyra asked, voice trembling. Ansa studied her carefully. Are you ready for that? Lyra nodded, wiping her tears. I need to see her, just once. The next afternoon, Ansa drove Lyra to a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and small houses painted in soft colors. They parked across from a little blue house with a white porch swing. That's it, Ansa said, pointing. Lyra's hands shook as she stared at the house. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Then the front door opened. A woman stepped out, smiling, holding the hand of a little girl. Lyra's breath caught. The girl looked about 4 years old. Dark curls bounced as she ran across the yard. She wore a yellow dress and carried a stuffed rabbit. She laughed, spinning in circles, chasing butterflies. Lyra pressed her hand against the car window, tears streaming down her face. That was her daughter, her baby, alive, safe, happy. She's beautiful, Lyra whispered, voice breaking. Ansa nodded. She is. Lyra watched as the woman sat on the porch swing, calling Seren over. The little girl climbed onto her lap, giggling, showing her something she'd drawn. The woman kissed her forehead, and Seren smiled, safe in her arms. Lyra's heart shattered and healed at the same time. Her daughter had a mother, a real one, someone who loved her, protected her, kept her safe. Would you give up everything just to keep someone you love safe? Lyra wanted to run across the street. She wanted to scoop Saren into her arms and tell her everything. Tell her who she really was. Tell her that she never stopped thinking about her, that every day without her felt like drowning. But she couldn't, because doing that would put Saren in danger. If Ronan found out she was alive, if McKenna discovered the truth, Saren would become a target, a loose end, a threat to the empire they'd built on lies. Lyra couldn't risk that. So she sat in the car, watching from a distance, memorizing every detail. The way Saren laughed, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she held her stuffed rabbit close. One day, Lyra whispered, voice thick with tears, one day, she'll know me. But deep down, she wondered if that day would ever come, or if the safest thing she could do for her daughter was to stay a stranger. Ansa reached over, squeezing her hand gently. You're doing the right thing. Am I? Lyra asked, voice breaking. How is it right to watch my daughter grow up without me? Because you're keeping her alive, Ansa said firmly. And sometimes love means letting go. Lyra closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. She'd survived the fire, survived the betrayal, survived losing everything. But this, watching her daughter live a happy life without her, this was the hardest thing she'd ever had to do. Saren laughed again, running across the yard, arms spread wide like she was flying. Lyra's heart ached with a love so deep it felt like it might swallow her whole. I'll come back for you, she whispered. When it's safe, when they can't hurt you anymore, I promise. But deep down, she wondered if knowing her would only bring danger. If the best gift she could give her daughter was the one thing she wanted most, distance. Lyra stared at the headline on her laptop screen, jaw clenched so tight her teeth hurt. Ronan Caldwin launches. The Caldwin Family Safety Foundation, dedicated to preventing fire-related tragedies. Below the headline was a photo of Ronan standing in front of a sleek glass building, smiling humbly, hand over his heart. The caption read, "In memory of Eliora Caldwin and their unborn child." Lyra's stomach turned. He was using her death, using their daughter, using the fire he helped orchestrate to build himself into a saint. The Foundation's mission statement made her sick. To honor the memory of those we've lost by preventing future tragedies and supporting families in crisis. The irony was almost unbearable. Ronan had locked her inside a burning house. He'd watched her beg for her life. He'd chosen to let her die. And now he was being praised for caring about fire safety. Ansa stood behind her, reading over her shoulder. He's turned your death into his redemption story. I know, Lyra said quietly, hands trembling. And the world believes him. Ansa crossed her arms. So what are you going to do about it? Lyra stared at the screen, mind racing. Anger burned in her chest. But beneath it, something colder settled. Clarity. I'm going to walk right into his world, she said slowly. And he won't even know it's me. Ansa raised an eyebrow. How? Lyra scrolled down the page. The Foundation was hiring consultants, experts in crisis management, family support programs, fire safety education. She clicked on the application link. I have the credentials, Lyra said. Ansa helped me build a background, education, experience, references. Everything checks out. You're going to apply? Ansa asked. I'm going to get hired, Lyra corrected, eyes sharp. She spent the next 3 days perfecting her application. Every word carefully chosen, every detail designed to make her look like the perfect candidate. Professional, experienced, passionate about helping families. She submitted it under the name Lyra Mirel. Then she waited. 2 weeks later, an email arrived. Lyra's breath caught as she read the subject line, Interview, requests the Caldwin Family Safety Foundation. She opened it, heart pounding. Dear Miss Mirel, we were impressed by your qualifications and experience. Mr. Caldwin would like to meet with you personally to discuss a potential consultant role. Please confirm your availability for an in-person interview. Lyra read the message twice, then a third time. Ronan wanted to meet her. Personally. Ansa appeared in the doorway, watching her carefully. You got the interview. Lyra nodded, unable to speak. Are you ready for this? Ansa asked. Lyra stood slowly, staring at her reflection in the window. Her face had changed. Her hair was different. Her voice had deepened slightly from the smoke damage. She wasn't Eliora anymore. She was Lyra Morelli. Confident, professional, untraceable. I'm ready, she said quietly. Ansa stepped closer. If he recognizes you, he won't, Lyra interrupted. He's looking for a ghost, not a consultant with a new name and a polished resume. Ansa nodded slowly. And if McKenna suspects something? Lyra's jaw tightened. Then I'll deal with her too. She replied to the email, confirming her availability. The interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 10 in the morning. Lyra had 4 days to prepare. 4 days to make sure every detail was perfect. 4 days to become someone Ronan would never suspect. The night before the interview, Lyra stood in front of the mirror, dressed in a tailored gray suit, hair pulled back neatly. She looked professional, polished. Nothing like the woman who used to decorate nurseries and dream about quiet mornings with her husband. She practiced her smile, warm but not too warm, professional but not cold. My name is Lyra Mirel, she said aloud, testing the words. I'm honored to be here. Her reflection stared back, calm and steady. Eliora would have been nervous, would have doubted herself, would have worried about saying the wrong thing. But Lyra was ready. Ansa appeared behind her. You'll walk into that office, and he'll shake your hand like you're a stranger. Lyra's lips curved into a small, cold smile. Good. And then what? Ansa asked. Lyra's eyes hardened. Then I find out the truth. Every lie, every secret, every piece of the plan that destroyed my life. And after that, Lyra turned to face her. After that, I decide what justice looks like. This was it. Her moment. Not of revenge, of entry. Lyra stood outside Ronan's office, hand hovering over the door handle. Her heart pounded, but her face stayed calm. She'd practiced this moment 1,000 times. She opened the door. Ronan stood from behind his desk, smiling warmly. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, his hair neatly styled, his expression welcoming. The grieving widower had transformed into a polished philanthropist. Miss Mirel, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. Lyra stepped forward, keeping her movements steady, controlled. She shook his hand, meeting his eyes without flinching. Mr. Caldwin, she said smoothly, the honor is mine. His handshake was firm, confident. He looked directly at her, searching her face, the way people do when meeting someone new. But there was no recognition, no flicker of doubt, no pause. He saw a stranger. Lyra's chest tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. This was the man who promised to love her forever, the man who kissed her forehead minutes before leaving her to die, the man whose child she carried, and he didn't recognize her. Please, sit, Ronan said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Lyra sat, crossing her legs, hands folded neatly in her lap, professional, composed. Ronan settled back into his chair, glancing at her resume. Your background is impressive. Crisis management, family support programs, exactly what we need. I believe in what this foundation stands for, Lyra said, voice steady. Supporting families during their darkest moments, preventing tragedies before they happen. Ronan's eyes softened. That means a lot to me. This foundation is personal. I lost someone very dear to me in a fire. Lyra's jaw tightened, but she forced a sympathetic nod. I read about your wife. I'm so sorry for your loss. Ronan looked down, the picture of grief. Thank you. Losing Eliora changed everything. I just want to make sure no one else has to go through what I did. Sometimes the strongest revenge is silence. Lyra wanted to scream, to slam her fists on his desk, to tell him she knew everything, that she remembered the key in his pocket, that she watched him walk away while she burned. But she didn't. She stayed silent, calm, controlled, because silence was power. I understand, she said gently. Turning pain into purpose is one of the most meaningful things we can do. Ronan smiled, grateful. Exactly. You get it. He asked her questions about her experience, her approach to crisis management, her vision for the foundation. Lyra answered each one perfectly, confidently, professionally. She was everything he was looking for, and he had no idea who she really was. 20 minutes into the interview, the office door opened. McKenna stepped inside, holding a tablet, dressed in sharp black. She moved with quiet confidence, eyes scanning the room. Then her gaze landed on Lyra. She stopped. For just a second, confusion flickered across her face. Her eyes narrowed slightly, studying Lyra's features, her posture, the way she held herself. Lyra's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral, offering a polite smile. "Miss Morell, this is McKenna, my chief operations partner," Ronan said. "She'll be working closely with you if you join us." McKenna didn't smile. She stepped closer, eyes still locked on Lyra. "Miss Morell," she said slowly, testing the name. "Have we met before?" Lyra's pulse hammered, but she tilted her head slightly, as if thinking, "I don't believe so, but I've attended several crisis management conferences. Perhaps we crossed paths at one?" McKenna's jaw tightened. "Maybe." But her eyes said something different. They said, "I don't believe you." Ronan glanced between them, oblivious. McKenna has an incredible memory for faces. If she thinks she's seen you before, she's probably right. Lyra laughed lightly. "I get that a lot. I guess I have one of those faces." McKenna didn't laugh. She just stared, silent, calculating. The room felt smaller, tighter. Ronan cleared his throat. "Well, Miss Morell, I think you'd be a great fit for our team. We'll be in touch within the week." Lyra stood, extending her hand. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwin. I look forward to working with you." Ronan shook her hand again, smiling warmly. But McKenna didn't move. She just watched, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Lyra walked toward the door, every step measured, controlled. She could feel McKenna's gaze burning into her back. Just as she reached the door, McKenna spoke. "Miss Mirelli." Lyra stopped. Turning slowly, McKenna stepped closer, voice low. "Something about you feels familiar." Lyra smiled politely. "Like I said, I must have one of those faces." McKenna's eyes didn't soften. "Maybe. Or maybe it's something else." Lyra held her gaze, refusing to look away first. Finally, McKenna stepped back. "We'll see." Lyra nodded once, then left the office, closing the door behind her. Her hands trembled as she walked down the hallway, but she didn't let anyone see. She'd done it. She'd walked into Ronan's world, looked him in the eyes, and he didn't recognize her. But McKenna suspected something, and suspicion was dangerous. Lyra got the job. 3 days after the interview, an official offer arrived. She was now a consultant for the Caldwin Family Safety Foundation. She worked quietly, professionally. She attended meetings, reviewed reports, and spoke thoughtfully during strategy sessions. She was everything they needed. Competent, dedicated, invisible. But McKenna watched her. Every single day. Every move. Lyra felt it constantly. The weight of McKenna's gaze following her across conference rooms. The way McKenna paused whenever Lyra spoke. The way her eyes lingered just a second too long. Lyra was careful. She changed her mannerisms, spoke differently, moved with deliberate control. But some things couldn't be erased. The tilt of her head when she was thinking, the way she touched her collarbone when she was nervous, the depth in her eyes when she listened to someone speak. McKenna noticed. One evening, after a long foundation meeting, Lyra gathered her things to leave. The conference room had emptied except for her and McKenna, who stood near the door, arms crossed, staring. Lyra looked up, forcing a polite smile. "Did you need something?" McKenna didn't respond immediately. She just watched, studying Lyra like she was a puzzle with missing pieces. "You're good at your job," McKenna said finally. "Thank you," Lyra replied, keeping her tone professional. "But something about—" McKenna trailed off, stepping closer. "Something about you feels familiar." Lyra's heart pounded. but her face stayed calm. Do I remind you of someone? McKenna's jaw tightened. Maybe, or maybe, I'm just imagining things. Lyra smiled gently. People say I have one of those faces. No, McKenna said sharply. It's not your face. It's the way you move, the way you hold yourself, the way you look at Ronan when he speaks. Lyra's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression steady. I'm not sure what you mean. McKenna stepped even closer, voice dropping low. I've spent years reading people, Miss Morell. And you? You're hiding something. Lyra met her gaze without flinching. Aren't we all? McKenna's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means everyone has secrets, Lyra said calmly. But that doesn't make them dangerous. McKenna studied her for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You're right. Everyone has secrets. She turned to leave, then paused at the door, glancing back. But some secrets are worth uncovering. Lyra didn't respond. She just watched as McKenna disappeared into the hallway. Her hands trembled as she gathered her things, but she forced herself to move slowly, deliberately. She couldn't let anyone see her fear. McKenna suspected something. She didn't know what yet, but her instincts were screaming, and McKenna never ignored her instincts. Over the next few weeks, McKenna's surveillance intensified. She showed up at meetings Lyra attended. She asked pointed questions during strategy sessions. She lingered near Lyra's office, pretending to review documents but really just watching. Lyra felt like a deer being circled by a wolf. One afternoon, Lyra was reviewing files in the Foundation library when McKenna appeared in the doorway. Miss Morell, she said smoothly. Do you have a moment? Lyra looked up, keeping her face neutral. Of course. McKenna stepped inside, closing the door behind. The room suddenly felt smaller. I've been thinking about our last conversation, McKenna said, sitting across from Lyra. About secrets. Lyra set down her pen. What about them? You said everyone has them, McKenna continued. And I agree, but I've also learned that some people's secrets are more dangerous than others. Lyra leaned back slightly, keeping her voice steady. Are you accusing me of something? Not accusing, McKenna said, tilting her head. Just curious. About what? McKenna's eyes hardened. About why you're really here. Lyra forced a small laugh. I'm here because I was hired, because I'm good at what I do. Maybe, McKenna said. Or maybe you have another reason. Lyra held her gaze. Like what? McKenna leaned forward, voice dropping. I don't know yet, but I will. The air between them crackled with tension. Lyra kept her expression calm, but inside, her mind raced. McKenna was getting too close, too suspicious. She needed to be more careful, or she needed to act faster. If you have concerns about my work, Lyra said evenly, you're welcome to review my performance with Mr. Caldwin. McKenna smiled coldly. Oh, I intend to. She stood, moving toward the door, but before leaving, she turned back one last time. You know what I think, Miss Morell? Lyra didn't respond. I think you're not who you say you are, McKenna said quietly, and I'm going to prove it. She left without waiting for a reply. Lyra sat frozen, hard hammering. McKenna wasn't just suspicious, she was hunting, and the hunter never stopped until she found her prey. She wasn't imagining it. Her instincts were screaming, and she never ignored her instincts. Lyra stayed late at the Foundation office, long after everyone else had left. The building was silent, except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside. She needed access to McKenna's files. Real files. Not the polished reports presented in meetings, but the personal documents hidden behind passwords and locked drawers. McKenna was too careful, too controlled. If there was proof of what really happened that night, it would be buried deep. Lyra moved quietly through the empty hallways, heart pounding. McKenna's office was at the end of the hall, door slightly ajar. She slipped inside, closing the door softly behind her. The office was pristine, everything organized, everything calculated, just like McKenna herself. Lyra sat at the desk, opening drawers one by one. Files, reports, contracts. Nothing unusual. Then she found a locked drawer at the bottom. She pulled out a thin metal tool Ansa had taught her to use years ago. Within seconds, the lock clicked open. Inside was a folder labeled Personal Confidential. Lyra's hands trembled as she opened it. The first document was a financial statement. Bank transfers. Large amounts of money moving between accounts. Dates that matched the weeks before the fire. Then emails. Printed and saved. One subject line caught her eye. Security system override, final confirmation. Lyra's breath stopped. She read the email carefully. It was from a contractor, confirming changes to the estate's security system, changes that would disable emergency exits, changes that would delay fire alarms, changes McKenna had requested. But there was more. Another email, dated 2 days before the fire. From McKenna to an unknown sender. Phase 1 complete. Ronan believes it's a controlled scenario. He thinks the fire will be small, manageable, enough to trigger insurance without real danger. He doesn't know I've altered the plan. By the time he realizes, it will be too late. Both of them gone. Empire mine. Lyra's hands shook so hard she almost dropped the paper. Ronan didn't plan to kill her. He thought it was a staged emergency, a fake fire, something controlled that would give him an excuse to claim insurance and save his failing empire. But McKenna changed everything. She sabotaged the wiring. She sealed the exits. She made sure the fire was real. And she didn't just want Eliora dead, she wanted Ronan dead too. Lyra flipped through more documents, insurance policies, estate plans, legal documents showing what would happen if both Ronan and Eliora died. Everything would go to the Foundation, and McKenna controlled the Foundation. Lyra's chest tightened. Her hatred had been aimed at Ronan for years. She'd blamed him for everything. For choosing fear over love. For standing outside that door with the key in his pocket. But he'd been manipulated. Used. McKenna had whispered poison into his fear, until he believed the only way out was through Eliora's death. But she never told him how far she'd take it. Ronan was guilty of cowardice, of weakness, of letting himself be controlled. But McKenna? McKenna was the architect of everything. Sometimes the people we blame aren't the ones who pulled the strings. Lyra stared at the documents, mind racing. Everything she thought she knew was wrong. Ronan wasn't the mastermind. He was the pawn, and McKenna was the queen. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Lyra's heart stopped. She shoved the documents back into the drawer, locking it quickly. She stood, moving toward the door, trying to look casual. The footsteps stopped outside McKenna's office. The door opened. McKenna stood in the doorway, eyes narrowing as she saw Lyra. "Miss Morell," she said slowly, "what are you doing in my office?" Lyra's mind raced, but her face stayed calm. "I was looking for the quarterly reports. I thought you might have a copy." McKenna stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "The quarterly reports are in the shared drive. Not my personal office." Lyra nodded. "You're right. I apologize. I should have checked there first." McKenna didn't move. She just stared, eyes sharp, calculating. "You've been working late a lot," she said quietly. "Why?" "I'm dedicated to the mission," Lyra replied smoothly. "Or maybe you're looking for something," McKenna said, stepping closer. "Something you shouldn't be looking for." Lyra held her ground. "I don't know what you mean." McKenna's jaw tightened. "I think you do." The air between them crackled with tension. Lyra knew she needed to leave. Now, before McKenna realized what she'd found. "I should go," Lyra said, moving toward the door. But McKenna blocked her path. "Not yet," she said, voice cold. "First, you're going to tell me who you really are." Lyra's heart pounded, but she kept her expression neutral. "I already told you. Lyra Morell, consultant." McKenna smiled, but it was sharp, dangerous. "No, you're something else, and I'm going to figure out what." Lyra met her gaze, refusing to back down. For the first time, Lyra wondered, who was the real monster? Lyra walked into Ronan's office the next morning without an appointment. She closed the door behind her, locking it. Ronan looked up, surprised. "Miss Morell?" "I didn't." Lyra placed a thick folder on his desk. "You need to see this." Ronan frowned, glancing at the folder. What is it? The truth? She said quietly. He opened it slowly, eyes scanning the first document, then the second, then the third. His face went pale. His hands started shaking. No, he whispered. This can't be real. It's real, Lyra said, voice steady. McKenna engineered everything. The fire, the security override, the sealed exits. You thought it was a controlled scenario? She made sure it wasn't. Ronan's breath came in short, panicked gasps. She told me, she said it would be small, manageable, just enough to trigger the insurance. She lied, Lyra said. She wanted both of us dead, you and Eliora, so she could take everything. Ronan stared at the documents, eyes filling with horror. I trusted her. I believed her. You let fear control you, Lyra said, voice hard. And she used that fear to destroy lives. Ronan looked up, tears streaming down his face. Why are you helping me? Lyra's jaw tightened. I'm not helping you. I'm showing you who your real enemy is. Ronan stared at her, really looked at her for the first time. His eyes traced her face, the shape of her mouth, the depth in her gaze. Recognition flickered, slowly, painfully. His voice came out broken. Eliora? Lyra's breath caught. For years, she'd imagined this moment, what she'd say, what she'd feel. But now that it was here, she felt nothing but emptiness. No, she said quietly. Eliora died the night you chose fear over love. Ronan's face crumbled. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know she'd died. But you stood there. Lyra interrupted, voice shaking. You held the key. You watched me beg, and you walked away. I thought it was fake, Ronan cried. I thought you'd be fine. You thought wrong, Lyra said coldly, and I paid the price. Ronan reached toward her, but she stepped back. Don't, she warned. Suddenly, the office door burst open. McKenna stood in the doorway, eyes wild, chest heaving. She'd heard everything. You, she hissed, staring at Lyra. I knew it. I knew you weren't who you said you were. Ronan stood, fury replacing his grief. You lied to me. You tried to kill her. You tried to kill me. McKenna laughed, sharp and bitter. You were too weak to do what needed to be done, so I did it for you. You're insane, Ronan breathed. I'm ambitious, McKenna corrected. And I was so close to having everything. She turned to Lyra, eyes blazing. But you just wouldn't stay dead, would you? Lyra's voice came out steady, cold. No, I didn't! McKenna lunged forward, but Ronan stepped between them. Security, he shouted. Get security now! Within seconds, guards rushed in. McKenna fought, screaming, thrashing as they grabbed her arms. You're nothing without me, she shrieked at Ronan. Nothing. I built this empire. I saved you. You destroyed everything, Ronan said, voice breaking. McKenna turned to Lyra, eyes filled with rage and something else. Fear. You think you've won? She spat. You think this is over? Lyra didn't respond. She just watched as security dragged McKenna toward the door. I'll tell everyone, McKenna screamed. I'll tell them you're alive. I'll destroy you both. But her threats faded as they pulled her out of the building, her voice echoing down the hallway until it disappeared completely. The office fell silent. Ronan collapsed into his chair, head in his hands, sobbing. Lyra stood still, watching him fall apart. She'd waited years for this moment, years to see him broken, exposed, destroyed. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt empty. And when it ended, McKenna was dragged away by security as she shrieked threats. Ronan collapsed in shock. Lyra stood still, torn between victory and sorrow. Lyra stood at the window of Ronan's office, staring out at the city skyline. She could destroy him. One press conference, one interview, one revelation that Eliora Caldwin was alive. The world would explode. Ronan's empire would crumble. His reputation would burn. Everything he, built on lies, would collapse. But so would her daughter's safety. The moment Lyra revealed herself, cameras would swarm. Reporters would dig. Questions would fly. And eventually, someone would discover Saren. Her beautiful, innocent daughter who knew nothing about fires, betrayals, or billionaires who chose fear over love. Seren would be dragged into a nightmare she never asked for. And Lyra couldn't do that to her. Behind her, Ronan's voice broke through the silence. "What are you going to do?" Lyra turned slowly. He sat slumped in his chair, face pale, eyes red from crying. "I could ruin you," she said quietly. "I know," he whispered. "I could tell the world everything. Show them who you really are." Ronan nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I deserve it." Lyra studied him. The man who once promised her forever. The man who stood outside a burning door, holding the key. He looked broken now, hollow. But breaking him wouldn't fix what he'd destroyed. "I'm not Eliora anymore," she said, voice steady. "Forgiveness is not freedom. Freedom is walking away from the people who almost destroyed me." Ronan stood, reaching toward her. "Please, don't leave. Let me make this right. Let me—" "You can't," Lyra interrupted. "Some things can't be fixed." "Then what?" he asked desperately. "What do I do?" Lyra's jaw tightened. "You live with what you did. Every single day. You look in the mirror and remember the woman you let burn. The child you never knew survived. You carry that weight for the rest of your life." Ronan collapsed back into his chair, sobbing. Lyra walked toward the door, then paused. "And you stay away from my daughter, forever." "Your daughter?" Ronan's head snapped up. "She's alive?" Lyra's eyes hardened. "She was never yours. Not after what you did." She left without another word, closing the door on Ronan Caldwin and the life she used to have. The next afternoon, Lyra stood across the street from Seren's house, one last time. The sun was warm. The sky was clear. And Seren was playing in the yard, laughing, spinning, chasing bubbles her adoptive mother was blowing. Lyra's chest ached watching her. She memorized every detail. The way Seren's curls bounced, the way her yellow dress twirled, the way her laughter sounded like music. Some victories don't feel like winning, but they're worth it anyway. Lyra wanted to run across the street. She wanted to hold her, to tell her everything, to whisper, "I'm your mother. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped fighting for you." But she couldn't, because loving Seren meant protecting her, and protecting her meant staying away. Lyra pressed her hand against the car window, tears streaming down her face. "You will never know me," she whispered, "but you will live happily, and that is enough." Seren laughed again, running into her adoptive mother's arms. The woman scooped her up, spinning her around, kissing her forehead. Lyra smiled through her tears. Her daughter was safe, loved, happy. That was all that mattered. She took one last look, then turned away. She didn't look back. Some stories don't end with revenge. Some end with sacrifice. Lyra walked down the quiet street, heart shattered, but resolved. She'd survived the fire. She'd uncovered the truth. She'd faced her demons. But her greatest victory wasn't destroying Ronan or exposing McKenna. It was choosing her daughter's happiness over her own. Her heart remained broken, but her daughter's was whole, and that was the only victory she chose. Lyra disappeared into the distance, a ghost who chose to stay dead so the person she loved most could live freely. Some love doesn't need recognition. Some love is silence. Some love is walking away. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is let go.